Sweet. Awesome. Well, episode 2 of the Flagstaff Home Podcast. Again, everyone, we are better mortgage professionals and real estate professionals than podcasters. But joining us today is the one and only Gary, or the Gary Nelson.
The Gary Nelson.
The Gary Nelson. And he has been a realtor since
1994.
1994. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a long time. I was thinking it was more in the 70s that you got started.
No. No, physically, yeah, but no.
Okay, so been a realtor since 1994, hitting close to 2 decades of, and all in Flagstaff, right?
Close to 3 decades.
Or sure, excuse me.
Yeah,
yes, I can do math.
Yeah, it's 28 years so far.
So close to 3 decades of
Yeah.
real estate experience, and is a highly, I'm not going to make him blush too bad here on camera.
That's okay.
But is a highly accomplished real estate agent and highly involved in his community, and is part of that and dealing with or assisting his association. You are currently the Arizona State Association president
That's
for the
correct,
Realtor
yeah.
Association.
Yeah,
correct?
for about another month and a half.
About another month and a half. All right. You're telling me between the mileage and the hotel points that maybe it's time for...
That's exactly right. A lot of miles, a lot of hotel points, a lot of travel. It's been
your
great.
wife Tammy will be happy.
It's been a wonderful experience. Yeah.
Well, and actually, let's just have an organic conversation on this here. What would you say? So having done that, and that's, well, how long had that been a goal for you to do that?
Well, it's been about a 20-year push. Believe it or not, it's taken that long.
Okay.
I had some leaders in Arizona, some past presidents. They kind of took me aside and urged me to gear myself up to dedicate my volunteerism to leadership, I guess, in the State Association of Realtors. And it's been a long journey, but it's been very rewarding at the same time. Learned a lot, met a lot of wonderful people, and it's like I said, it's been very rewarding.
Awesome. Well, and it's not something obviously that happens overnight. And as you serve in several different positions and volunteerism and things that lead up to
Right.
the experience and then the networking and the things that get you into a position to actually take that on. So not even just the last year, but culminating to that, what would you say maybe some of the, do you have an experience or two to share of how you've changed or different experiences and saying what did that volunteerism, ultimately provide for you there?
It made a big change in my leadership style, I would say, more than anything else, and translating that leadership style over to not only the Association of Realtors, but inside the brokerage that I work with, and then inside the charities that I dedicate time and effort to. So it's really kind of helped me see a little bit big picture on how to work, how to interact with people.
Yeah.
And as you know, this is the industry it's a people industry. It's not a housing industry, and it's not a loan industry. It's about people, and so that's been a big push and to really understand what service means when it comes to different associations and working with people.
I like it.
Yeah,
I like it.
It's different.
And I'd probably go so far as to say that's probably changed how you, because you still are a licensed realtor yourself, you are still helping people. And has it even changed that grassroots, how you do your business with people here in town?
It made me focus, that's for sure. When you are very busy with association work and traveling, I'm well over 2 months in hotels this year so far.
It's crazy.
In hotel rooms, so I'm getting towards 2.5 to 3 months now in Marriott and Hilton points. But
yeah.
So yeah, it really made me focus on my business a little bit more. So I'm actually having a pretty good year in selling real estate, which is really what my family wants me to do.
Yeah,
is to sell real estate and be a realtor and brokerage duties and things like that. So it caused me to focus on that and get hyper focused and did pretty well.
Nice. Well, and so with that experience on your belt and with having some additional perspective, because with being a realtor here in Flagstaff and very hyper focused on our market, because we are a very unique market. Certainly national markets have plenty of impact here, but we do have our own nuances here. you have some interesting perspective between state and local. And so I'd be curious, let's kind of talk about that here as far as it goes to Arizona. I saw a statistic, and I want to ask you about this. We haven't talked about this. No,
okay.
Not much of pre-conversation, but I saw a statistic that it's somewhere from, so just before you got into real estate, so in 1991 to current, real estate is about 483% appreciation in Arizona.
Oh, I wouldn't doubt that. I
Yeah.
think that I can't verify that, of course.
Yeah, it's a statistic. It's fact.
Oh, absolutely. And there were times in the mid-1990s where I saw neighborhoods in Flagstaff double in value in 1 year.
Yeah.
So basically, I remember in the 1995, 1996 lower green law, you could get a house in the 40,000s. And then following year, they were up in 80,000s.
Yeah.
Which, getting a house in Flagstaff in a 40,000 range would just be phenomenal. But and of course, it was expensive at the time.
Yeah, expensive at the time, and
Right.
higher interest rates through the 90s and different
Right,
things happening.
and that's a big thing. Is all through that it was much higher interest rates than what we're looking at right now, even.
Yeah. Well, and
Which
I
I'm
guess,
sure we're going to talk about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Not to beat dead horses here, but it is a hot button for sure. But I guess one question I have to start in on that is, and without showing you all these charts and graphs and everything, Arizona, as far as that appreciation over that 30-year time frame, is some of the highest in the country.
That's a
Doubling.
phenomenal investment. If you just look at it that way, if people are investing most of their family funds into a home in that amount of time, look at what else increases that at that kind of a rate.
Yeah, it's
Stock
the big,
market should.
it's definitely a big picture
Yeah,
mindset, right?
Yeah.
But I guess on top of that, though, is with some states being more in the 250s over that same time frame, and Arizona being almost double some other states, what do you attribute to that to? You're in that state association presidency and seeing, okay, why has Arizona grown like it has as to Gary Nelson, right? Going on your expertise, and then I'm interested to see how you think it could continue to grow, where that demand comes from for housing here.
Well, I think Arizona is such a diverse state that a lot of people, once they realize how diverse it is, especially in geography, but also in people and everything else, and opportunity. I think once people realize that, then they gravitate towards Arizona. So Arizona has grown tremendously in that amount of time in population and city growth. Not as much as northern Arizona, but you'll definitely see that in other parts of the state. But Arizona is a phenomenal place to live. It really is. You can find any type of community that you're looking for in Arizona. You can find large cities that are very metropolitan and very with it, and then you can find very rural places where you can go get lost in a cabin. So
Absolutely.
and that's rare. You can't find that in a lot of places. And
Well, all within like a 3-hour commute.
yeah, exactly. When I grew up here, I'm a local in Flagstaff, and our big thing in high school was to try to ski in the morning and be in Oak Creek in the afternoon. That was our badge that we would try to do, try to achieve. And we actually did that several times, where you'd ski in the morning and then lay out at Red Rock, or whatever. But to have those kind of opportunities is very, people just love it, I think.
Yeah. And then as far as what you and I, it's we talk quite a bit about Flagstaff versus Phoenix, right? And the difference of Arizona and maybe these larger metropolitan markets, what's happening in those markets and what happens in Flagstaff. I guess off the cuff, drawing as far as what would you say are the major, in real estate context, what are the major differences and similarities? Let me start with the similarities. What are the major similarities between us and a Phoenix market, and then what are the major differences right now?
Well, I think our market kind of follows the Phoenix market a bit in trends. Would be what I would say, just kind of off the cuff, is that we have a tendency to follow several months behind Phoenix with market trends, but we are unique in that we have such a strong second home market. Although that's actually strong in Phoenix too. You get a lot of snowbirds down in the Phoenix
Even
area.
Canadians
and
up in
people don't think
Anthem,
about that. There's a lot of Canadians and a lot of people from the northern parts of the United States that winter there. And are called snowbirds. But and then also, but it's not as big as it is here. I remember statistics of 30 to 35% of the structures in Coconino County are second homes, which is huge.
Yeah.
My business has always been about 50% second home buyers and sellers.
Yeah.
And so that is a similarity, but it's also a difference in the two markets, I would say. But really what it cuts down to it is the market in Flagstaff is just a much, much more expensive market than it is down in Maricopa County, to the point where we're a third or almost a half more expensive than Maricopa County, and it's once again because of lifestyle and how desirable of an area it is to live in, and it has difficulties with that. You know, it's hard for people to live in Flagstaff, locals to live here because it is so expensive. But.
And is that primarily so? And we're similar in a lot of ways of our demographics and demand. That was interesting. I've never thought of the Valley has a big second home presence.
It does,
as well. But
I was actually interviewed by the Chicago Sun-Times on that subject.
Okay.
It's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
You wouldn't expect that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, when you see it more globally, right?
Right.
Because we, especially sitting here in Flagstaff, just think like, oh my gosh, we're getting inundated with people from Phoenix, and there's this attitude.
Right.
Sorry if you're from Phoenix and you're listening to this. There's this Flagstaff attitude that just prevails out there, that we want to be this little small town, right? In a lot of ways, for better and for worse. You look like you want to say something on that.
No, I was just thinking of that I had a thought earlier about how we are compared to other states around Arizona in the Four Corners area and in all directions. But we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah, well, and ultimately saying, whereas heading with that we don't realize that Arizona in general has a lot of that same flavor, not just Flagstaff, that we are a destination. People are going down to conferences in Phoenix. There's all sorts of different reasons to be wintering in Phoenix, as well as then vacation destinations in Sedona and Four Corners and national
well, you
parks
wouldn't think about it, but Lake Havasu is a strong second home market out of California. The people that live in Tucson have a tendency to gravitate towards the mountains in that area and have second homes there. The White Mountains are a strong second home market. So that's throughout the state. There's some similarities and some differences in the markets, that's for sure.
So is it, and not to be Captain Obvious on this too much here, but then the supply and demand aspect, that's what makes this expensive, right? As far as we have the demand,
right.
But I heard someone say, I was sitting next to a realtor, and this is years ago, and they took a phone call of a new, they say, hey, I got it, like anyone that has realtor friends has that moment where it's like, I got to take this or something, and it was, she was talking to this gentleman, wanted to buy, and this is like 5 years ago, but still, he's like, wanted to buy a $100,000 cabin in Flagstaff, and so she's having to stand back and educate a little bit, and she said, okay, so what are you looking at? She's trying to find out what he really wants, so she can start to then probably slowly educate him on $100,000 is maybe not going to get him what he wants.
That's right.
But she did use the line of, if you want trees, that's considered beachfront. And so when you bring up Havasu, and
that's
saying,
interesting that somebody said that, because I'd never thought of it that way. Trees are considered beachfront. The Forest Service, the bordering the Forest Service, that's considered beachfront.
Not even just bordering, right? Is saying, okay, if you are in a mountainous, treed, beautiful community of Flagstaff, like people, we struggle with wrapping our minds around the value of the real estate, but that knowing that it's the demand, and that the same when you brought up Havasu, it made me think of like all those. I did a scouting adventure of 60 miles in June with a bunch of scouts, and I thought it was going to be beautiful and rural. And I'd been to some parts of Parker and Havasu before, and I thought 60 miles will definitely hit a lot of beautiful and nature, and 70% of that was lined by $1 million homes.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right, and so that whole going
been through there,
down Bull, so we went from Bullhead to Havasu, and those homes right on the lake are expensive, and it's drastically different if you're a couple, mile off that river, right? Whereas just Flagstaff being landlocked, and then we got beach property all over us with trees.
Well, the treed areas, the way I always have said it to my clients is that what's a tree worth? Because there's areas around Flagstaff, if you have a 2.5 acre parcel that's heavily treed versus a 2.5 acre parcel that isn't, you can see that each individual tree is worth $10,000 to $20,000. It's kind of crazy, but it's the truth, right?
Yeah.
Think about it. You know, a 2.5 acre that's parcel that doesn't have any trees. It's just barren. It's not barren, but let's just say it's
more
meadow.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
More
it's
meadow.
it's what, $125,000 to $150,000. I think you could get something like that.
Yeah.
But you're heavily treed. You're $350,000 to $450,000. Right?
Yeah.
So it's
So is it when we say that yes, we're similar to a lot of the state? Now we talk about the differences in our costs. Like we are within the top 3 areas of the state as far as cost wise.
Oh, I would say, yeah. I think Flagstaff, the ritzier parts of Scottsdale and Sedona are pretty expensive. I think Prescott's up there too.
Is Prescott?
Yeah, Prescott's fairly expensive.
Yeah.
Less than us, but not that much less. And then, so those are I think the most expensive parts of the state. But now I'll slip into that other part, is that you have to keep in mind that Arizona is actually a bargain compared to other states around it.
We got a big picture.
And you know, the person that's looking for that $100,000 cabin, did they come from Missouri? Or I mean, really, you
no
can't.
fault to Missouri.
No fault to Missouri, but let's just say it's a less expensive real estate market.
Sure.
So, because where in the Western United States can you see the bargains that you see in Arizona? And I know that that's kind of being flipped, because it really, really is expensive to live in Flagstaff for locals. It's a hard push, and it's housing opportunity and affordability is very difficult to have conversations about here. But you just have to keep it in mind that we're still much less expensive than other parts of the Intermountain West.
Yeah. Well, and I guess to where then in the context of then just in Arizona, is there anything else that you'd attribute that to of why we're more expensive, or it's just a highly desirable area?
It's highly desirable, and we're completely surrounded by national forest.
Yeah.
There's, I think the statistic is that it's either 13% or 17% of land in Arizona is privately owned.
Yeah.
So that's, I think it has actually 17%. I'd have to look that up, but to say that there's that little amount of privately owned property, we're bumping up against the forest and having growth struggles continuously now in all areas of Arizona, but definitely in northern Arizona and Flagstaff area.
Well, and I know we can't, when we talk about what can we do, right? What can we do to make housing affordable, to be it's this or dichotomy of that we want to be a warm and open and welcoming community. And I always tell my wife this when she talks about, it's funny because she's been here, she went to NAU, and so she's been here about 18 years, and I've been, which is crazy to say that, and I've been here about 13, 14 years, and so it's, when she's starting to be that keep Flagstaff, right? And,
sure, yeah.
and toting that line there, and I talked to her, I said, well, where do you close the door? Right? Who's the last person that we then close the door behind and say, okay, we can't get, because, I hear an In-N-Out's coming, right? And some people are probably super excited about that. And some people not so excited about that, right?
Well, my arteries aren't excited about it, but I am.
It's going to be a battle of the burgers
yeah.
right there on Milton.
Yeah, South Milton Road, yeah.
Yeah,
true.
well,
battle
and then
the
you got a brown bag burger coming up here around the corner. But anyways,
I didn't know that.
The commercialization increase, and I was driving in Sawmill, that new student housing development that just popped up right next to Sawmill.
Sure. Yeah.
Parking lot's full.
Oh, yeah.
Like how can these 100+ unit complexes just pop up, and they're, I know occupancy is not 100%, but they appear to be busy. That then demand is not going to decrease, I don't think.
Well, there's a huge rental demand too.
Housing
nationwide and statewide, and then throughout the area here, there's a huge demand for housing, whether it's for sale or whether it's for rent. Yeah. And the reason is we haven't really people don't really talk about this that much, but we haven't adequately planned for growth.
We have not.
Nationwide, we haven't. And the, excuse me, the biggest contributor to that is that people we haven't, as a society, we haven't planned for the impact of the millennial generation entering into, and I know we've talked about this briefly, but the millennial generation is as big as the baby boomers, and they're much older than people think that they are. The upper end is around, 40 years old, 42 years old of the millennial generation.
That's right.
And so they're in their prime buying and renting time, especially buying. And we are short 7,000 housing units just in the Flagstaff area. So the same exact thing is the case for rentals. And so I don't see any relief when it comes to rents, unfortunately, because there's such a huge demand. Even with these huge apartment buildings that are dedicated to student housing, I don't think that they're full either, but I think they're probably 2/3 full. And just to guess, I mean, we're in one of those buildings now, isn't this part of it?
Yep. I'd have to double check, but over 50% occupancy.
I would think.
Sure, yeah.
And
did you try and park in there?
I know where to park because my barber's right here, so I know how to park and where to
do
park.
that. Yeah. So, well, and so when you said that's, I know you said it was maybe off cuff on about 17% of private land in Flagstaff. So if we say, okay, we can't really, people need homes, we can't change that.
Right.
People are attracted to Flagstaff for the variety of reasons, whether wanting to live here themselves, grow their family here, work in NAU or all these different things. I mean, I've spoken with a whole slew of people potentially relocating for NAU, and a lot of them making a real decision of like, we love everything about the job, the area, but the housing could be a piece that just says not going to happen. And that's not something, like, again, we can't be everything to everyone, but we do. I think it's a complex problem with complex solutions. So do you see, as best you can guess, I know you don't, you certainly are, is in the association, there's a lot of activity with government affairs and Realtor Association, but do you see that 17% land is going to increase? Are we going to figure out how to be more efficient with that? Are other communities around Flagstaff going to just bloom more? How are we going to fix that? Because we can't, if we just say we're not going to really fix the demand issue, we just need housing, whether it's with purchase or rentals. Where are we going to solve that problem?
I don't think we are not going to solve that problem by increasing the amount of private land owned in Arizona, because it's just flat out not going to happen. I think the only possibility for that is the state trust land. But I'd have to take a look at my percentages, but there are areas around Flagstaff that are state trust land. The state will eventually sell. They have the ability to sell those, and then the funds from that go to school construction and school maintenance.
Okay,
that's the way it's set up in the state charter. So I think you will see some growth in those areas around Flagstaff, but it would be a section of land like Section 20, which is at the end of Butler Avenue. You'll see that be developed. There was a plan to have that developed years ago. But other than that, you're bumping up against the National Forest. The National Forest, they do not sell their property. They trade here and there, but they don't trade down. They only trade up. Okay. So it's kind of funny, but it's true. So you will see a continued great lifestyle because of that.
Yeah.
That we have close proximity to National Forest,
sure,
and national monuments and things like that. None of that will change. But you will also see higher density subdivisions and neighborhoods, which is what we've seen through the city of Flagstaff. And
sure,
the county has adopted those kind of higher density zonings as well.
And I should keep better track of it, and I'm sure you have a better handle on it than I do. But anecdotally, like, you hear like, okay, this developer has this chunk of land and eventually will go, and there's 1,000 units that can happen in there, and so with as best you know of what's already could be developed and density added, do you see that even being able to keep pace with the demand, or do you have a high concern of the supply?
No, I don't think it'll keep pace with with the demand. And the reason is that because that's where I look at national trends and some economists that I follow, where they're saying new home starts are down this year, down 17, almost 18% over the year before. And so the unfortunate thing is that building costs and what production builders are willing to do, they're not keeping up with the demand. Yeah. And they will not be keeping up with the demand. And that's the unfortunate reality of what's going on nationally, and then that translates down to locally as well.
And I think an important point to make there as well, because a lot of national news and large media outlets point out housing starts,
right,
but not completions. And that's where we all know that once you stick a shovel in the dirt, you can't live in that. It needs time to complete. I think Flagstaff typically is like 6 to 8 months. So I have seen some,
if you're lucky, it's 6 to 8 months. Sometimes it's longer than
True.
Well, so depending on what the demand
probably
is.
I'd say at best, right? Probably add that little caveat to it. At best, 6 to 8 months. And so a lot of news outlets saying, "Oh, this is the new housing starts, and this is the demand," and like, "Oh, we're going to be good." But it's like, no, that demand is here now, and that house won't finish, especially if they start throttling things like we are seeing some builders throttle a little bit because they're wanting to be economically protective with the environment right now. And so that's, I think, an important key point is that, the demand's here already.
Oh, absolutely. And will continue to.
And yes, that dirt here sits out off of Butler in different areas, but it's dirt.
It is dirt, and like you said, there's a shovel in the ground, and have to get to completion. That's for sure. Yeah. But with the costs of construction, cost of employees, cost, all of the overhead that goes into that, it's not an easy thing to solve. So we can't blame the production builders or builders in general for not being able to keep up with it, but because I think if sometimes physically they can't keep up with that.
Oh, I mean, there's only so many resources. Right. And you and I both know people in the trades and in the industry, and it's like the wheels were running the last 24 months. They were running as fast as they could. And from a capitalist standpoint, because they could sell them, right? They were printing money.
Yeah.
The builders
all of a sudden, they like us again, though.
The builders
don't they? Yeah. But I will say this, though. It seems like, I'm not sure if you've noticed this yet, but it seems like everything's on sale right now. Consumer goods, everything's on sale. Some little vlogs that I watch and some blogs and different things. It seems like a lot of home appliances and home goods there's some great deals to be had heading into Christmas here, and I think that's going to translate also to building materials. So the cost of building materials, I think, will start slowly coming down here.
And I am just fascinated. I'm fascinated by. I guess I make jokes earlier here in a conversation about being Captain Obvious. Like I am not some big think tank economist or anything, but textbook definition of inflation is the cost of goods outpacing wages, right? And cost of goods increasing. And then when you say things going on sale, that's exactly what this whole economic situation that we're in with the Federal Reserve and everything happened is to slow inflation or to therefore decrease the cost of goods.
Right.
That's what they're wanting to do. And there's some pain points in that, certainly. Right. And I think it's just, it can't be overstated as far as saying, hey, if we, I think I saw a statistic of like 39% of the, I think it's CPI measurement. So, hey, if we have people watching this and commenting, like, correct me where I'm wrong, but I think it's like 39% of that is shelter. And so it's real estate sales, it's contractors, it's housing, it's your Home Depots, your Lowe's, your housing goods, your appliances, your couches, that like over a third of our economy is housing related. So slowing down of that, these higher interest rates, like it doesn't take rocket science to think this is exactly what they're doing. So things, and that perception of now things from where they were are on sale.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And my wife and I are looking at purchasing a new refrigerator. I think the one we have is probably 20 years old or
Gotcha.
15, 18 years old, something like that.
Yeah.
I'm done with thing, just having these little quirks that I don't like anymore. But it's amazing how, going into November and into December, there's going to be some really good sales happening. So
and let's translate. You're a realtor. Let's translate that we're not selling appliances. How does that translate to real estate?
Oh, it's the same thing. And where it's kind of what we discussed at the beginning was that we, a time for a buyer right now, sellers are much more willing to participate in interest rate buy downs or discounting a property or paying for a buyer's closing costs. They weren't doing that a year ago. You were going to be in a multiple offer situation, and unless you were completely in line and willing to accelerate what your offer was and give everything to the seller, things are a little bit different now. And so I think, no, don't get me wrong, it's still, affordability is difficult, but with the interest rates, so with the loss of buying power that buyers have, but there's some definite opportunities there for people.
In the way that we had our president and CEO, Brian Rogers, on the podcast last week, and I don't know if he said that in that one, but it's hit home to me so strong. I think this was another moment that he brought this up. He
has some gems when he
talks. Low interest rates, government subsidy, like trillions, we're talking trillions of dollars of subsidy to interest rates, subsidize the payment to the buyer to give more money to the seller. So they basically, because of that low rate environment, that's where the buyers were able to say, yeah, I'm getting the payment I want. It's almost like we go to that used car, no offense to our used car seller or car sales friends, but when they're like, hey, it doesn't matter what the car is worth, you get the payment. We were, not we, but like that was the buyer mentality of like, hey, I am getting a smoking deal on this payment. This totally fits my monthly budget.
Right. Even
though the house price was $100,000, $200,000 higher, it was because a sub 3% interest rate was subsidizing that price for the seller. And and now sellers have to be real to understand, hey, the market, yes, there is a solid amount of appreciation that I don't think will go away. I guess we should ask Gary Nelson, like, what are we up? If we started like right when COVID hit, because that's when the rates hit, right? Just after COVID and all that stimulus hit. So if we said from start of 2020 till current, what's ballpark total appreciation for Flagstaff?
Oh, it's...
So we're like 19?
Yeah, that's the number that popped into my head.
Well, no, but it's 19 plus, right? Because then 2020
right.
was like close to 19% appreciation, plus like another 15 in 2021, and then maybe we'll end the year around 9. So maybe like 30 to 5. I don't know. Doing math there.
Yeah. I've got statistics in front of me right here, which are the median sales price for the state. And in 2019, the median sales type, now you got to keep this in mind, this is the state of Arizona.
Sure.
Was $232,000 was the median sales price in September of 19. In September of 20, it was $242,000, so it jumped up $10,000. But to 21, 1 year later, it jumped up to $329,000, so it went up about $80,000, let's say, in the median sales price, and we are still higher than that. We're at $362,250 for the median sales price in the state of Arizona, and these are September statistics for all of those years. But that kind of shows you how the market dramatically increased in value. So yeah, about 19%, a couple of those years, and then for a total of about, I think you said 35% just now, and that's sounds about right.
Probably in that vein,
right?
Yeah.
So that tells it, a seller that didn't buy during those years, because sometimes a seller needs to sell that they bought during those years, will probably take a loss or only have a slight gain. But somebody that's owned their property for a long time can still sell nicely in this market.
Yeah, and so and then projecting forward, I know it's anyone's guess, but to say, okay, that's a lot of appreciation. Historically hot, right? Very hot.
Extremely hot.
Extremely
and historically,
hot.
Let's say the Flagstaff market, we were always looking at 4 to 6% increase per year.
Yeah,
that's kind of.
And I know that there's a lot of people need to really understand. Google it, like month to month appreciation, depreciation versus year over year.
Right.
Right. Because again, the news media loves to tout like month over month numbers to think make you think that this is all crashing or something, and things are slowing. Certain sellers that were just unrealistic and needed to come down anyways.
Sure.
Right. But you and it was actually last month that we were talking about price or list to sell ratio and percentage of decline from their list price to their actual sell price. In Flagstaff was only 97%, which blows your mind.
Right. You wouldn't think it's that strong, but it is,
Yeah. So only a 3% reduction of what they're actually getting to. So do you see?
But that does not take into account sellers that have dropped their price, right? So,
sure.
There have been some
price reductions.
Prior to that. So we kind of have to take it from a little bit of a grain of salt, but that also means that the market is it's adjusting, let's say, or decline. We'll flat out say declining, but it's not crashing.
Sure,
we're not seeing where people are losing, having to come off their price by 20% or even 10% or even 5%. Yeah.
So let's project that a little bit here in Flagstaff with as much as you're more of a gut feel in the stats and the things you're watching. Do you think heading into next year, and I know there's just so many variables, so it's a very overly complex picture. And I guess with some context of people that are paying rent, right? They're spending money somewhere. There is a cost for that as well, right? So it's a matter of, okay, if we see more of a correction, I'm just trying to give people my perspective and see if you agree that if we saw maybe correction, right? We don't know what rates will do. Let's just generally say rates are going to be high for a while. They'll probably dip lower at some point in time. So there's some strategy there to be had. But just price alone and price opportunity. Correction, I wouldn't gamble with, right? To say, hey, in 3 months from now, 6 months from now, our house is going to be slightly lower than, and correction being like 10% or less, right? If houses are going to be slightly higher, depending, and a lot of that becomes deal by deal.
Right.
Some houses being more attractive here in Flagstaff than others. What's the seasonality? Do we just have a big snowstorm and that Phoenician's not going to come up and look at the home? So good luck. You're the only buyer looking at this. There's a lot there. That to me is like, don't hold off on anything major. If it's more than 10%, maybe we start to say, hey, let's look for that bargain a little bit more. If something, right, if that refrigerator is going to go on sale for more than 10%, maybe we're a little more interested in finding that deal. But if it's going to say, hey, within now and the unforeseeable future, there's only maybe 10% to be gained off of this, I'm not waiting on that refrigerator purchase.
Yeah.
So for real estate, what do you think? Are we going to see a little more of a correction and that 10% decline? Do you think things will be pretty steady? Are we going to see? You said no crash, so you're probably not thinking past that.
Oh no, I don't. I do not see us crashing right now. I see us adjusting and declining, but I don't think we're going to see that much through next year. I think there might the National Association of Realtors is predicting a slight increase in equity in the next year, which is interesting. So
I think somewhere like 2%. Right?
Yeah,
1
to 2% year over year. Yeah, so
national
probably
aggregate,
next year will be the bottom of whatever it is that we're in. We don't have a crystal ball, but that's a lot of predictions, and you hear the economists that are saying the exact same thing or something like that. So if you are buying right now and your property dips in value 5% or something like that, as long as you don't sell, you're going to be fine. And getting an interest rate, locking an interest rate now so that you're not paying a higher interest rate in 3 or 6 months from now is probably a very, very smart thing to do. So it's not a bad time to buy right now. It's actually a pretty smart time to buy right now if you look at the inventory that's on the market, what sellers are willing to do, and look at a long-term goal rather than a short-term goal.
And I think one of the things that I just keep going back to is perception of market. And perception is so powerful. People underplay that right now so much to where, when we saw things go from like 3s to 4s, we saw a lot of people pumping brakes, right? A lot of people getting kind of nervous and, oh no, the sale of real estate's done. And prices weren't even at their peak at that point. Right? And then all of a sudden when 5s hit, we saw a lot of brake pumping. And then I'm almost seeing now that we're like selling at 7s, I'm seeing this little knee jerk of people saying like, oh wait, like it's not going down anytime soon.
Right.
And it's that perception and to where I'm very curious to see. Some experts that we're hearing are calling for maybe back into the 5s by mid next year. right? Who knows, right? But if we go from a perception market of, and fixing our perception now that houses are on sale, concessions are happening, repairs are happening on homes, unheard of 6-8 months ago, right? And that perception of those things are not happening. But if we see rates go maybe 6, 8, Brian last week was gone from maybe even 9, right? And then they go back down to like a 5, right? That I think that perception of things are on sale again could just very well put people in a very more competitive situation than right now.
And if they do go to 5, the buyers that buy now can refinance easily at that point.
Absolutely. But they're not competing for the home again.
Right. They're not competing for the home again, but they will be not paying 9% rates right now. And that's, I think, key, because what you just said it, multiple sources that I've seen where they're thinking interest rates might go somewhere between 9 and 10% in the next several months. But
not to be doom and gloomy, but it's like, what is it? It's plan for the worst, hope for the best.
Right.
But planning for, so it's going to be an interesting market ahead of us. And I guess
one of my favorite sayings I got from you and other realtors and other lenders are, marry the house, date the rate. Right.
Yep. And divorce the landlord.
And divorce the landlord, and that's key right there. So
yeah, you probably, I guess, if you think legally and really ethically, you probably should do those in a different order, right?
But I guess so. Divorce the landlord.
Divorce the landlord. Marry the or date the rate.
Date the rate and marry the house. Right? Yeah, in that order.
So I don't know, but yeah. Well, awesome, Gary. Well, this has been a wealth of knowledge. I really, and you were one of the main. I want to tell you this: that you were the main reasons where I wanted to actually do this. I don't know how many people are watching this in the audience.
And hopefully
get some out there, but these communications are so valuable, right? And I just, as far as hearing people that are on this boots on the ground talking about real estate, where a lot of other people just get so drug along in the fear of, and real estate's a big decision, one of the biggest purchases of their life. So people get really nervous and they get very, I spent, I bought a new mattress for the kids, and I probably had over 20 different mattresses in the cart. Like researching things to death, like rethinking. I even ordered a couple and then canceled within like 10 minutes because then I saw another bad review online or something. And so I can't imagine what, I know fully, like people in the real estate world are just trying to gather knowledge. They're trying to look at things, and then they're just like, anything will just push them back into a shell and just think like, man, not the right time. I missed the boat. So that's really why I think it's so important that we put the boots on the ground information and try and help people out, because there is, again, if this is a 2 to 3 year decision, maybe not the right time to buy real estate if you can't make that type of large commitment to time. Right. But outside of that, I guess, is there any other, before we wrap here, is there any other big picture thoughts that you have for our Flagstaff community or to that buyer seller on is it really a good time to make some decisions here?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think it's both a perfectly fine time for a seller or a buyer that needs to sell or needs to buy to jump into the market. I really do. I think I've had some families do that recently where they've moved from one property to another, and you helped them. And but it was perfectly fine. They did what they needed to do for their family, and they're extremely happy with the house that they got and turning it into a home. And in the big picture, that's what they needed to do for their own family, and it worked out great for them. Going back to, I have one last flip little comment, and going
please.
Back to what you'd said about divorcing the landlord, I saw it said in a different way, which is you're buying a house whether you like it or not. You're either buying your own or you're buying your landlord's. And that is very, very telling when you think about that as to what the rental market's like. Because the rental market is actually higher, no matter what, than the purchase market, what your monthly payment would be. And I would urge people to give you a call and talk about that.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, Gary, thanks for joining us on the podcast here. We look forward to having some updates here in the future.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks for all you do.
Happy to come. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.